Before we begin, do you have a theory about this case or a story of your own? Leave a message on our socials. Our handles are all just Nightwatch Files without the space, or head over to nightwatchfiles.com to find them all in one place. Your insights might be featured in a future episode. I'm Harper Finley, and this is Nightwatch Files. Quick note, if you enjoy the show and want to support it continuing, we have a Patreon that goes for just $3 a month, which is less than a coffee. You'll get ad-free access to every episode, and your support helps us add more perks in the future. Whether you want to help keep the show going or just prefer listening without ads, you can find the link in the episode description. Every supporter makes a real difference. Now, let's get into today's case. At 6:15 on the morning of August 26, 1986, a bicyclist pedaling through Central Park made a discovery that would stop him in his tracks. Beneath a tall elm tree behind the Metropolitan Museum of Art, in an area known to locals as a quiet, secluded spot, lay the body of a young woman. She was partially clothed, with garments bunched around her neck and waist. Her face bore visible bruising. Garish red marks encircled her throat. The bicyclist raced to a payphone and dialed 911. Within minutes, police officers arrived at the scene. As they approached the body, they noticed something unusual. Several people had gathered along a nearby stone wall, watching the commotion. Among them sat a young man who seemed strangely reluctant to leave. When a jogger asked him what was happening, he murmured that he thought they'd found a body. She noticed something distinctive about his appearance. His face was covered in strange vertical scratches. The young man would linger at the scene, even as police began their investigation. He would watch as officers cordoned off the area. He would still be there as detectives arrived and began their work. What began as a missing person inquiry would rapidly transform into one of the most explosive criminal cases in New York City history. The investigation would expose a world of privilege and excess, of teenage drinking and drug use in Manhattan's wealthiest neighborhoods. It would ignite fierce debates about class, religion, gender, and justice. It would spawn headlines that screamed across tabloid covers for months. And at the center of it all would be two teenagers from elite Manhattan families whose paths crossed on a summer night with devastating consequences. Jennifer Levin was born in 1968 to Stephen Levin and Ellen Dominitz, both from Jewish families. Her father came from a lineage in the shoe business, but had initially tried his hand at acting before finding his true calling in Manhattan real estate. Jennifer had an older sister named Danielle. The family's first home was a small ranch house in Merrick, a suburban town on Long Island. Those who knew Jennifer as a child described her as a live wire, bursting with personality. In contrast, her sister Danielle was considered the beauty of the family. Jennifer was extroverted and determined from an early age, constantly trying to insert herself into the games her older sister played with friends. At 4 years old, she would parade around in her mother's high heels, strutting and singing. Some mothers in the neighborhood found her hyperactive. Her father believed sugar overstimulated her and suggested she be given diet soda instead of sugary drinks. When Jennifer was 5, her parents separated. Her father moved to Manhattan, while Jennifer, her mother, and sister relocated to Los Angeles around the time Jennifer turned 6. They lived on an estate once rumored to have belonged to Rudolph Valentino, a property now filled with other single-parent families. Jennifer attended public school in California, remaining an irrepressible child who craved attention. During this period, her father's real estate business flourished. He visited 3 to 4 times a year, and the girls would travel to New York for Christmas and summer vacations. When Jennifer was 8, her father married Arlene Vorhust. Jennifer admired her new stepmother's glamorous appearance, but also harbored resentment toward her. Neither Jennifer nor her sister attended their father's wedding. Through her mother's connections in the film industry, Jennifer attended Hollywood parties and met celebrities like Chevy Chase. But life in California wasn't always glamorous. On one occasion, her mother's friends were too stoned to take her to Disneyland as they had promised. In the fall of 1979, 11-year-old Jennifer moved back to Long Island with her mother, settling in Manor Haven, part of Port Washington. Unhappy about being a new student, she took a proactive approach to making friends, introducing herself and handing out her phone number. She started junior high at John Philip Sousa School, where she initially felt like an outsider, but soon became part of the most powerful clique. Despite her social success, her teachers noticed she seemed unhappy. Her schoolwork was poor, and she eventually fell out with her clique. Jennifer confided in a friend that other girls were spreading stories about her. In early 1982, she transferred to Weber Junior High for her final semester. There, she made many new friends and became known for her playful antics and attempts to make people laugh. Her social circle consisted mainly of girls from her school and a few older high school boys. She and her friends would hang out, and occasionally they would cut class to smoke marijuana in someone's basement. Jennifer's first time trying it left her feeling confused and upset. During this period, she was self-conscious about her appearance, her freckled skin, her height, and her figure. She would stoop or wear baggy clothes to hide her body. Even so, some boys found her appealing, and she dated two of the most popular ones. In the summer of 1982, Jennifer abruptly moved from her mother's home into her father and stepmother's large, renovated loft in Soho, Manhattan. She later told friends she felt her mother had not provided her with enough guidance and security. For high school, her parents enrolled her at the Baldwin School, a private school on the West Side known for assisting students with learning disabilities. Jennifer had struggled academically in Port Washington. At 14, Jennifer blossomed. She grew more poised and no longer tried to hide her figure, instead opting for skin-tight jeans. Fearing she would look too suburban, she adopted a punk haircut. At Baldwin, she met Brock Pernice, a student from York Prep, who was captivated by her dramatic good looks. They began dating regularly after he took her to a Billy Idol concert. Jennifer and her new city friends started frequenting the disco Studio 54, which was popular with high schoolers. At first, she was on the so-called B-list, waiting in line to get in, but she was aware of the more glamorous A-list world within the club. Her father set strict rules for her nightlife, but she was considered an honest kid who always called if her plans changed. In the spring of 1984, nearing her 16th birthday, Jennifer became obsessed with the rock star Billy Idol, writing his name in her friends' journals and fantasizing about him with her friend Joan Huey. She was also writing awkward, rhyming poems about love. Around her 16th birthday, she became preoccupied with losing her virginity, believing it was a necessary step toward experiencing true love and gaining social acceptance. She carefully planned the experience with a boy she felt she was in love with, not Brock. Though she was exultant afterward, her happiness was short-lived. Just days later, she saw the boy with another girl and sobbed with jealousy, storming and screaming at him. After this, she resumed her on-and-off relationship with Brock while also seeing other boys. During the summer of 1984, Jennifer worked in Southampton and befriended Lelia Van Baker, a wealthy girl who moved in the elite Upper East Side social circles. Jennifer was enchanted by this world of A-list parties and celebrity acquaintances. Lelia promised to introduce her to everyone, including Robert Chambers, whom she described as the best-looking in the bunch. By the fall, Lelia had kept her promise, and Jennifer began attending private parties at Studio 54. In early 1985, Jennifer was part of a trio with Lelia and another friend, Kitty Schoen, that frequented downtown clubs like Area and West Side bars. She became known for her trendy, eye-catching style, often wearing miniskirts, ripped jeans, and a cross necklace in the style of Madonna. Despite the compliments she received, she remained insecure about her body, believing she needed to be thin to be accepted by the preppy guys from the East Side. It was during this time that Brock introduced her to Dorian's Red Hand, an Upper East Side bar. Initially uncomfortable, feeling like a wannabe, she eventually grew to like the bar, and it became a regular spot for them. In the summer of 1985, while again in Southampton, Jennifer had a glorious affair with a boy who she said was the first to truly awaken her sexually. During this romance, her friends noted she seemed infinitely more sure of herself. She also began keeping a diary. The relationship ended with the summer, leaving her feeling betrayed and disheartened. During her senior year of high school, from fall 1985 to spring 1986, Jennifer became more experimental, occasionally using drugs like cocaine, ecstasy, and LSD. She told friends that she had multiple sexual partners to help assuage the pain of her summer breakup. It made her feel beautiful and wanted, at least for a moment. She frequently fought with her father and stepmother over typical teenage issues and complained to friends that her mother was more of a pal than a parent. Her romantic life was turbulent. Her relationship with Brock continued its cycle of breaking up and reconciling, and friends described her as a specialist in rejection who developed crushes on unsuitable boys. One night at Dorian's, she saw Robert Chambers for the first time since Lelia had mentioned him. Finding him gorgeous, she was intrigued when a friend told her he'd had this real hard life and was rumored to be a thief. Jennifer thought this made him sound like a fascinating rascal. At a Valentine's Day party in 1986, she begged the hostess to invite him. She was ecstatic when he came and thought he was really nice, though he was so intoxicated he later did not remember meeting her. In June 1986, Jennifer graduated from high school, having been voted best looking by her class. At her graduation ceremony, she did a little dance on stage and flashed a victory sign. That night, after celebrating with classmates, she went to Dorian's. There, Robert Chambers told her friend Betsy that he thought Jennifer was the best-looking girl in the world and asked to meet her outside. Jennifer's heart leapt, and after speaking with him, she came back inside glowing. By the second week of July 1986, she and Robert had begun a sexual relationship. After their first date at his mother's apartment, she excitedly told friends he was great, gentle, and agreeable, and that he constantly complimented her beauty. She was having a wonderful summer, working as a hostess at Flutie's in the South Street Seaport, and saving money for Chamberlain Junior College in Boston, which she planned to attend in the fall. In mid-July, after returning from an orientation weekend at the college, she found terribly flattering messages from Robert on her answering machine. They slept together again soon after, and Jennifer was overheard on the phone describing him as a fantastic lover. Just before leaving for a trip to California, she slept with him a third time and told Lelia Van Baker he was the best person she had ever slept with in her entire life. Quick break. Ads keep the show running, but if you want to skip them, the ad-free version's on Patreon for just $3 a month. Links in the show notes. And we're back. Thanks for sticking through that. Let's get back to it. Robert Emmett Chambers was the first and only child of Phyllis Shanley and Bob Chambers, born 1 year after their marriage in 1965. His mother, Phyllis, was an Irish immigrant who had grown up in poverty on a farm in County Leitrim and came to the United States with aspirations for a better life for herself and her future children. His father, Bob, came from an Irish-English family that had been in America for generations. Bob had been raised comfortably and sent to private schools. As an infant, Robert was described as beautiful, docile, and mild-tempered. The family initially lived in Queens, first in Woodside and later in Jackson Heights. Phyllis worked as a private duty nurse for wealthy Upper East Side families, including a brief stint for the Kennedys. Through this work, she became determined to provide her son with the privileges of that world. At age 4, Robert was enrolled in the prestigious St. David's School Nursery in Manhattan, a Catholic school attended by children of prominent families. Though his babysitter worried that attending a Manhattan school made him an isolate in his Queens neighborhood, Robert did not complain. He was known for being charming, polite, and keeping things to himself, including pain. Around this time, his father's drinking began to grow heavier. Robert told a teacher at St. David's that his mother hit him with a strap when he was bad. In 1974, when Robert was 8, the family moved to a high-rise apartment on Park Avenue in Manhattan, just blocks from the armory where he was enrolled in the Knickerbocker Greys, a military drill group nicknamed the Social Register's Private Little Army. He became an exemplary cadet, learning to handle a sword and fire a rifle. He also became an altar boy at St. Thomas More Church. While initially timid in the city, he soon became popular, though a classmate, Billy Markey, suspected him of stealing money from a piggy bank during a birthday party. Around the age of 10, Robert and his friends were already drinking liquor and smoking marijuana. His mother took immense pride in his achievements, which included winning a public speaking contest, earning marksmanship medals, and being part of the Greys' elite honor guard. Her own social standing grew as well. She became an extraordinary fundraiser for the Greys and, in 1979, was elected the organization's president. She was a stern mother who would criticize and humiliate Robert in public when he disappointed her. Robert, in turn, told a friend that he felt ground down by the pressure of his mother's expectations. During this period, his father's drinking problem worsened, and he spent many evenings in neighborhood bars. In the fall of 1979, Robert began his freshman year at the prestigious Choate boarding school in Connecticut, a move that made him proud. That same fall, a dramatic family intervention regarding his father's drinking led to Bob Chambers abruptly leaving the family apartment. The event deeply upset Robert. He later claimed that the desire to blot out this painful memory led him to start using cocaine. At Choate, he began staying up late, cutting classes, and his room became a clubhouse. In the spring of 1981, Choate asked him not to return for the following semester due to his poor academic performance and missing work. After spending the summer on a Choate-sponsored trip to Spain, where he was known for his cool air and popularity with girls, Robert began his sophomore year at the Browning School on Manhattan's East Side in the fall of 1981. He fell in with a wealthy, sophisticated group of prep school students who partied heavily, used drugs, and traveled by limousine. It was during this time that he began stealing from friends, rifling through coat pockets and drawers at parties. In early 1982, he was expelled from Browning after being caught with a stolen teacher's pocketbook. He showed a blank, emotionless quality when confronted. His mother, recognizing he had a drug problem, sent him to a rehabilitation clinic in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Upon his return in February 1982, he enrolled at York Preparatory School. He became a star player on the soccer team, but his academic effort remained inconsistent. After rehab, he immediately returned to drinking and drugs, favoring a spot in Central Park behind the Metropolitan Museum of Art. His troubles continued to escalate. He threatened Brock Purnas with 2 strangers to collect a $100 debt over a pair of stolen skis he had sold him. He struggled through his senior year at York, with the headmaster forcing him to stay for detention to complete his work. At his graduation in the spring of 1984, he was handed an empty diploma case and had to attend summer school to finish his coursework. After finally graduating, Robert worked briefly on a yacht during the summer of 1984, but was fired after the owner suspected him of stealing champagne and liquor. That fall, he enrolled at Boston University's School of Basic Studies but continued to party, drink, and use cocaine. By December, Boston University asked him to leave after drugs were found in his room and he had used a roommate's stolen credit card. Upon his return to New York, his mother banished him to a dreary basement apartment, telling him he had to find a job and pay his own way. However, she relented in early January 1985 after he caught the flu, letting him move back into his bedroom and helping him search for a job. In the summer of 1985, he reconnected with David Filyaw, a young man he knew from his York prep days who had just been released from prison for stealing. Robert boasted to Filyaw about his own burglaries and credit card scams, and the two hit it off. They began committing burglaries together, including a penthouse on Park Avenue and another on East 72nd Street, stealing thousands of dollars worth of valuables to support their drug habits. Robert even bragged about the exploits to a new girlfriend, who thought he was suave like Cary Grant in To Catch a Thief. In December 1985, Police questioned him about the burglaries after finding a Hunter College registration receipt with his name on it near one of the crime scenes. He denied involvement and blamed Filiaw. Robert's criminal activities continued into 1986. In March, after being caught using a stolen credit card on a shopping spree, he was again confronted. To avoid criminal charges, his parents agreed to send him back to rehab, this time to the Hazelden Foundation in Minnesota. He completed the program and returned to New York in late April 1986. He refused his mother's suggestion that he live in a halfway house, promising he could stay clean while living at home and attending Narcotics Anonymous meetings. However, he soon began going out to bars and discos again and was seen asking for drugs at the Palladium, telling a friend he had been dry for 7 weeks. In June, following Jennifer Levin's high school graduation, she went to Dorian's Red Hand, a bar they both frequented. There, Robert told her friend Betsy Shankin that he thought Jennifer was the best-looking girl in the world and asked to meet her outside. Jennifer's heart leapt, and after speaking with him, she came back inside, glowing. By the second week of July 1986, Robert and Jennifer had begun a sexual relationship. For their first date, they went to his mother's apartment, where he was described as gentle and agreeable and repeatedly complimented her on her beauty. Around 6:15 on the morning of August 26, 1986, an early morning bicyclist named Pat Riley was riding through Central Park when he made a disturbing discovery. Beneath a tall elm tree behind the Metropolitan Museum of Art, he spotted a body sprawled on the ground. The woman was naked except for clothes bunched around her neck and waist and a jean jacket across one arm. Riley raced to a payphone and called 911. Around 6:21, Sergeant Anthony Michalak and police officer James McCreary received a woman-down call and headed to the scene. As they arrived, they noticed several people watching from a stone wall, including a young man who was sitting down. Michalak approached the body and observed garish red bruises on the neck, concluding she had been strangled. He checked for a pulse beneath her heart and found none. He declared it a crime scene, requested detectives, and covered the body with brown wrapping paper for privacy. Meanwhile, a jogger named Susan Bird approached the young man sitting on the stone wall and asked what was happening. The man, who had strange vertical scratches on his face, murmured that he thought they'd found a body. When Bird asked why he hadn't checked on the person, he replied that the cops would chase him away. At 7:45, Detective Mickey McEntee arrived at the Central Park precinct and was told he had caught his first homicide case. He quickly changed into his homicide clothes and sped to the crime scene behind the museum. The Night Watch Detective Unit briefed the Central Park detectives that morning, initially speculating that the woman was killed by the driver of a brown car and dumped in the park. McEntee examined the body, noting she had been strangled and likely assaulted. Her face was dirty, one eye was swollen, and there were what looked like bite marks around her nipples. He believed she resisted her attacker and was likely raped. He observed that an earring was missing from her pierced ear. McEntee and his partner, Joe Kennedy, searched for the missing earring. 45 feet north of the body, under a crabapple tree, they found a pair of soiled white panties, a lipstick case, a black hair bow, and an area where the ground appeared disturbed, suggesting a struggle had occurred there. The crime scene unit initially dismissed these findings, having already collected a pair of blue panties near the tire tracks. Convinced the white panties were the correct ones, McEntee collected them himself. Detectives searched the pockets of the victim's jean jacket and found a wallet containing identification, but no money except for half of a dollar bill. The victim was identified as Jennifer Dawn Levin, age 18, from Soho. Around 10 o'clock that morning, Dr. Maria Alandi from the medical examiner's office arrived. She examined the body, noting abrasions on the chin, neck, cheeks, and forehead, a contusion above the left eye, and pinpoint hemorrhages in the linings of her eyelids, which indicated strangulation. Around the same time, Alexandra Legata, after getting her learner's permit, found the key to her apartment still under the doormat and grew concerned about Jennifer. She called Jennifer's number and spoke to a distraught Steve Levin. Shortly after, she called Robert Chambers, who claimed Jennifer left him at Dorian's to see her boyfriend, Brock. Late that morning, 2 detectives arrived at Steve Levin's real estate office and informed him of his daughter's death, showing him Polaroid pictures for identification. They then accompanied him to the family's loft to look through Jennifer's room for leads. Meanwhile, detectives visited Alexandra Legata's apartment. She told them what she knew and gave them Jennifer's diary. They instructed her not to call any more of Jennifer's friends. That afternoon, after lunch with a friend, Phyllis Chambers was at home when detectives arrived asking for Robert Jr. They told her they were investigating a missing girl and believed Robert may have been with her. Detectives Al Genova and his partner questioned Robert at his apartment. He appeared in sweatpants and a t-shirt with scratches emblazoned on his face. He admitted to knowing Jennifer and agreed to go to the precinct to help with the investigation. Before leaving, he called Joe Perry and told her it had been a bad day and it was going to get a lot worse. At the precinct, Detective McEntee led Robert into an interrogation room, read him his Miranda rights, and began questioning him. Robert claimed he last saw Jennifer in the vestibule of Dorian's and that his cat scratched his face while his hand was injured by a sanding machine. Around 4 o'clock that afternoon, Jennifer's grandfather and uncle formally identified her body at the morgue. Late in the afternoon, Detectives John Lafferty and Lieutenant John Doyle took over the questioning, attempting an avuncular approach. Despite their efforts, Robert stuck to his story that he was not with Jennifer after leaving the bar and that his cat caused his injuries. At 5 o'clock, the police held a press conference telling reporters that Jennifer Levin was last seen leaving an East Side bar, leading to speculation of a Mr. Goodbar killing. Around 7 o'clock that evening, after hours of questioning, Detective Lafferty informed Robert that Jennifer was dead. Robert cried out, "Oh no," and covered his eyes, asking how she died. At 8 o'clock, Detective Mike Sheehan, who knew Robert's father from a neighborhood bar, began questioning Robert. After building rapport, Sheehan confronted him with statements from Jennifer's friends. Robert admitted he did leave the bar with her. Shortly after 9 o'clock, Detective Martin Gill continued the interrogation. Confronted with conflicting witness statements, Robert changed his story again, admitting Jennifer gave him the scratches during an argument on the street. When pressed further, he confessed they went into Central Park together. Robert told Gill his final version of events. He claimed that Jennifer tied his arms with her panties, sat on his chest, and hurt him during aggressive sex. He said he instinctively put his arm around her neck to pull her off, and she went back over his shoulder, accidentally dying. That evening, Assistant District Attorney Steve Sirocco arrived at the precinct. After being briefed, he arranged for a videotaped statement. After hours of interrogation, during which Robert Chambers' story changed multiple times, he finally confessed to killing Jennifer Levin, but claimed it was an accident. At this point, Assistant District Attorney Steve was called to the precinct. Sirocco, an ex-Marine with a confrontational style, was convinced from the start that Robert was a calculated liar for 3 main reasons. He had initially told Jennifer's friends he was not with her. His first alibi was overly detailed, including the names of TV shows he claimed to have watched, suggesting he had researched it. And the story he was now telling of an accidental death during aggressive sex made no sense given the physical evidence on Jennifer's body. Believing a trial was likely, Sirocco wanted Robert's confession recorded on videotape. His strategy was to first let Robert tell his story in a relaxed, guy-to-guy manner, and then take his run and become confrontational to expose the lies for a future jury. After getting the necessary clearance, Sirocco called the DA's videotape unit to the precinct. When he first saw Robert, Sirocco was surprised by his demeanor. He wasn't crying or wringing his hands, but just looked blank. As the camera began rolling, Robert sat across a desk from Sirocco, Detective Mike Sheehan, and Detective Mickey McEntee. He groomed himself by pushing back his hair and began to tell his story. He claimed that in the park, Jennifer became enraged when he told her he didn't want to see her anymore. He stated that she freaked out, got up, and knelt in front of him and scratched his face, showing the marks on his cheek to the camera. He said he told her this is crazy and tried to leave, but she calmed down, gave him a massage, and said he looked cute, but he'd look cuter tied up. According to Robert's videotaped account, Jennifer then tied his hands behind his back with her panties, pushed him to the ground, and sat on his chest with her back toward him. He narrated that she started to take off his pants, started to play with him, and started jerking him off. While saying this, he demonstrated for the camera by rubbing his right hand up and down along an imaginary penis. He emphasized that it was not gentle, stating she was doing it really hard and it really hurt him. He claimed his pleas for her to stop were met with a strange laugh, more like a cackle or something. He continued, stating that she sat on his face, dug her nails into his chest, and then squeezed his testicles. The pain, he said, was non-stop. He declared stiffly and with stilted Victorian vocabulary that she was having her way with him, without his consent, with his hands behind his back. Robert explained that the pain became unbearable. He just could not take it. He said he managed to get his left hand free, sat up a little, and just grabbed at her. In that single motion, he claimed, she flipped over his shoulder and landed twisted against a tree. He said he stood there for 5 to 10 minutes, believing she was just trying to scare him. He explained his inaction by saying he was in shock, not because she might be dead, but that this girl that he knew did what she did to him. Frustrated that Robert's story remained unchanged, Sirocco began his confrontational run. He started by highlighting the physical disparity, asking how tall Robert was. 6'4"? Robert corrected him to 6'3" and claimed Jennifer, though smaller, was strong and would freak out. Sirocco then questioned him about their previous sexual encounters, asking about birth control. Robert said it never even entered their minds at all. Sirocco asked whether their sex had been out of the ordinary. Robert described their prior encounters as just regular sex, with one exception on a roof when Jennifer took pictures of him while he was naked and asleep, which he found odd. Sirocco then attempted to establish a motive, suggesting Robert was already angry at Jennifer for her part in the public argument with his girlfriend Joe Perry and for scratching him. Robert agreed, but then reverted to his story, claiming she became apologetic and sweet before tying him up, foiling Sirocco's attempt to build a coherent motive for rage. Sirocco challenged the plausibility of Robert becoming sexually aroused while in pain. When Sirocco asked dubiously if he became erect, Robert seemed to take it as an affront to his masculinity and defensively replied that he was in too much pain and wasn't even thinking about it. Sirocco then slid crime scene photos across the desk. Robert recoiled, covering his eyes and saying, please, he really didn't want to see. Sirocco persisted, describing the severe markings on her neck and asking how he could account for them. Robert, after a hasty glance, demonstrated with his arm how she landed against the tree, mimicking her open, glazed eyes for the camera. Finally, Sirocco directly attacked the story, saying it just didn't make any sense to him. He suggested that something triggered Robert, which led to the most heated exchange of the taping. Robert responded angrily that she molested him in the park. Sirocco baited him, asking how could she molest him? Was he telling him she was trying to rape him in the park? Come on, Robert. Robert replied indignantly that he was hurt from her. Sirocco said that if he were there telling him this story, Robert would be laughing. Robert, on the verge of rage, asked if it made no sense that somebody could put your hands behind your back and push you down and then get on top of your chest. Sirocco replied, exactly. Robert was exactly right. Despite the provocation, Robert did not explode and stuck to his story. Sirocco ended the taping by giving a summary for the benefit of a future jury, stating his belief that Robert had lost his temper and intended to kill Jennifer. Robert's final words on the tape were a chilling assessment of the girl he had killed. He said he liked her very much, that she was a very nice person. She was just too pushy. Immediately after the taping concluded, Detective McEntee formally told him he was under arrest. The videotape became a central piece of evidence. Sirocco was ultimately removed from the case, partly due to his aggressive and opinionated comments on the tape. An edited version, with some of Sirocco's most inflammatory remarks removed, was later played for the jury at the trial. Jack Littman, the defense attorney, initially tried to have the tape suppressed, but later came to believe the edited version was helpful to the defense, as it showed Robert sticking to his story and never erupting into rage, appearing at best as a frightened, candid teenager. After the taping, Detective McEntee formally placed Robert under arrest. Around 2 o'clock in the morning on August 27th, Robert was taken on the walk for the press as he was moved from the precinct to a van for transport to central booking. News people shouted questions at him, and he endured a barrage of flashing camera lights. Quick break. Ads keep the show running, but if you want to skip them, the ad-free version's on Patreon for just $3 a month. Links in the show notes. And we're back. Thanks for sticking through that. Let's get back to it. The morning after Robert's arrest, a friend of the Chambers family contacted prominent defense attorney Jack Littman. After speaking with Bob Chambers over the phone, Littman drove to pick him up in his Cadillac DeVille and interviewed him in the car. By 9:30, having also met with Phyllis Chambers, Littman had agreed to take the case. He then sped downtown to the criminal courts building, where Robert was being transferred to a detention cell. Amidst a throng of reporters and TV vans, Littman introduced himself to his new client, cautioning him to try to be calm and not talk to anyone. Later, in a detention cell, Littman had his first detailed conversation with Robert, who maintained the same story he had given the police. At the medical examiner's office, Detective Mickey McEntee waited for the autopsy to begin. Maria Alandi commenced her examination by washing Jennifer's body and sealing her clothes in plastic bags. The internal examination revealed hemorrhages in Jennifer's tongue and temples, which suggested she had been punched in the mouth and on the sides of her head. Dr. Alandi concluded that Jennifer had been not just strangled, but beaten as well. The autopsy also confirmed that Jennifer had not been raped, as there was no trace of semen found. That night, Littman argued at Robert's arraignment that his client should be released, claiming Jennifer's death was an accident resulting from rough sex. A prosecutor countered that far more than one blow was landed and mentioned reports of bruises and bite marks on the body. The judge ordered Robert back to jail pending a grand jury investigation. Robert's friends from the prep school scene attended the hearing, and he gave them a thumbs-up sign. The following morning, headlines in the New York Post and Daily News screamed "Jenny killed in wild sex," and sex got rough. A furious Jack Littman contacted a Post editor, insisting he had never used the words rough or wild, and was told the headline writer took a bit of literary license. A wake was held for Jennifer at a West Side chapel. The coffin was open from the waist up, and though she was dressed in a mint green cardigan, bruises were visible through the mortician's makeup on her face. The sight of her swollen eye convinced her friend Margaret Trehill that Robert's story of an accidental chokehold could not be true. In the days and weeks following Jennifer Levin's death, the case began to mesmerize New York City. It quickly became front page and top-of-the-hour news, with the media dubbing it the Preppy murder. The public was fascinated because the tragedy involved what observers called flaming youth, and better yet, flaming rich youth. The story of two young people who had all the advantages of youth and money, only to lose everything in a single night, struck a powerful chord with the public. The narrative reinforced several popular beliefs: that having a good time is dangerous, that young people are incapable of handling liquor and sex, that the rich are no better off than anyone else, as evidenced by the tragedy that befell the pair. Within a week of Jennifer's death, the case was a principal topic of conversation at breakfast tables, on coffee breaks, and at dinner parties throughout the city. This public obsession was fueled by the media, which sent out battalions of reporters to uncover any information about the teenagers and their social circle. Their lifestyle, including their drinking, drug use, promiscuity, and extravagance, was explored as if they were a new tribe, an anthropological phenomenon. The case ultimately became one of the most widely covered murder stories in New York's history. The rough sex defense introduced by Jack Littman immediately shaped the public narrative. This narrative quickly took hold among the public, and many people seemed to blame Jennifer for her own death. At an East Hampton party over Labor Day weekend, guests speculated that she was wild or into S&M. When one guest expressed skepticism about Robert's story, another authoritatively insisted the bruises on Jennifer's body were a result of rough sex, expressing a mix of condemnation and envy for the perceived depravity of kids today. The rumors and victim blaming became so prevalent that some journalists pushed back. Newsday columnist Murray Kempton wrote a piece indicting the police for leaking Robert's story, suggesting they did so because they were male chauvinists entrapped in our too common assumption that these days no girl is virtuous. John Cotter, metropolitan editor at New York Newsday, saw the story as a good one from the start because the victim was a white girl, and the death of a white girl always sells papers. He viewed the story's real power not in the victim's specific identity, but in what it said about kids and bars and late hours, a narrative that would resonate with and worry middle-class parents about their own children. For editors, the case was significant because it sold papers more effectively than major international news, such as a gas eruption in Cameroon that killed 1,000 people. The focus was on stacking the wood, gathering details, and getting pictures that could break your heart, like a photo of the dead girl alive at a party. Within the teenager's own social circle, the reaction quickly became polarized. Soon after the arrest, Robert's supporters began to rally around him, and standing up for Robert took the form of putting down Jennifer. Hostile rumors circulated that she was wild, exhibitionistic, and provocative, with some regulars at Dorian's even suggesting that the bite marks on her body were from sexual play with other boys. The involvement of several prominent Catholic priests in securing Robert's bail led to a significant public controversy. Archbishop Theodore McCarrick's letter of support for Robert was a key factor in the judge's decision to grant bail. In response to an angry letter from the Levin family and public backlash, John Cardinal O'Connor wrote an open letter expressing his worry that mercy toward a Catholic boy could be perceived as callousness toward a Jewish girl, and that the Catholic establishment will be seen as rallying around its own. He also worried that some Catholics might dismiss Jewish resentment as paranoia. This letter, intended to calm the waters, instead stirred them up, leading to radio station call-ins claiming Jewish girls are whores and reporters arguing over whether the cardinal had inflamed religious tensions. On September 10th, a grand jury indicted Robert Chambers on 2 counts of murder, one for intentional murder and the other for murder committed under circumstances evincing a depraved indifference to human life. On September 24th, a bail hearing was held before Judge Howard E. Bell. Littman submitted a lengthy bail application motion, along with 40 character reference letters from Robert's friends, family friends, former teachers, and priests. One particularly influential letter came from Theodore E. McCarrick, the Archbishop of Newark, who wrote that Robert possessed a true respect for his neighbor. Judge Bell stated he gave consideration to letters from a person of such stature. On September 29th, over prosecutor Linda Fairstein's objections, Judge Bell granted Robert bail, setting it at $150,000. He made Monsignor Leonard, Robert's second-grade religion teacher, responsible for his court appearances. Phyllis Chambers told Jack Dorian, the owner of Dorian's Red Hand, that she did not have enough money for the bail. Dorian, remembering his own brief, unpleasant time in jail years earlier, decided to help by putting up his $600,000 East Side townhouse as partial collateral. Monsignor Wilders also contributed $21,000 of his personal savings. Robert was subsequently released from jail. On October 15th, Manhattan District Attorney Robert M. Morgenthau held a press conference to announce that his office had won a burglary indictment against Robert Chambers. David Filyaw, who was already under indictment for attempted murder, was named as Robert's co-defendant. Morgenthau explained that the media attention on the Levin killing had made some people more willing to cooperate in the burglary investigation. On October 21st, Lippman wrote a formal request to prosecutor Linda Fairstein for property necessary for the defense, including Jennifer's journal, which had been rumored to contain a sex diary with a list of her lovers and ratings of their prowess. The public reaction shifted again when Jack Lippman subpoenaed Jennifer's journal, which the press immediately dubbed a sex diary. While the idea was titillating, Lippman's move garnered him extraordinarily bad publicity. He was portrayed as a blackguard, out to drag Jennifer's reputation through the mud, and was even given a Now You Know Why People Hate Lawyers award by the American Lawyer magazine. This backlash was seen as a milestone for the victims' rights movement, which had previously protested Lippman's tactic of tainting the reputation of another female murder victim, Bonnie Garland, in a 1978 trial. The diary controversy led to public demonstrations, with people carrying signs reading "Justice for Jennifer" and "No more blame the victim" tactics. On the morning of January 4, 1988, the trial of the People versus Robert Chambers began on a snowy day. The courthouse was chaotic, with spectators jostling for seats and a large press contingent straining against barricades. When Robert arrived with his parents and lawyer Jack Lippman, flashbulbs illuminated the corridor. Inside the courtroom, the Levin and Chambers families were seated in separate rows, just a few feet apart, without acknowledging one another. Robert, seated between his lawyers, jounced his leg nervously until Judge Howard E. Bell entered. Prosecutor Linda Fairstein began her opening statement by asking the jury to keep Jennifer Levin in your mind's eye. She promised to prove that Robert beat and dragged Jennifer, with photographs of her body serving as silent witness. She concluded by stating there was no sex, only violence, only death. Defense attorney Jack Lippman focused his opening on the principle of reasonable doubt, telling the jury that Robert Chambers does not have to prove his innocence, they have to prove his guilt. His strategy was not to present a large number of his own witnesses, but to fracture and fragment the prosecution's story through cross-examination. On the second day, Lippman objected to the introduction of large blow-up photographs of Jennifer's body, calling them lurid and inflammatory. Judge Bell overruled him, and the jury saw the huge reproductions of her face and body. Fairstein was pleased, believing the photos would speak louder and more eloquently of murder than testimony. Lippman then adopted a counter-strategy of repeatedly showing the photos to the jury, even providing magnifying glasses, in an attempt to diminish their power through overexposure. Fairstein presented police witnesses from the night watch and crime scene units. However, Lippman's cross-examinations repeatedly highlighted flaws in the initial investigation. He pointed out that detectives failed to photograph the alleged ground disturbance where a struggle supposedly occurred, did not photograph Jennifer's panties in the park, and even allowed a police vehicle to drive over the crime scene, leaving tire tracks. The police testimony left some jurors unimpressed, with one thinking of them as Keystone Cops and another calling them bunglers. Jennifer's friends testified during the trial. Betsy Shankin took the stand, and under cross-examination by Lippman, she was questioned about whether she told police Jennifer wanted to spend the night with Robert and was taking diet pills that evening. Alexandra Legata testified about Jennifer's actions at Dorian's. On cross-examination, Lippman got her to admit that Jennifer wanted to stay at the bar because Robert was there, that Jennifer had told her Robert was good sexually, and that she didn't like him as a person. Lippman believed this portrayed a classic role reversal, where Jennifer was objectifying Robert. Edwina testified that she did not observe Jennifer drinking, but Lippman confronted her with a police report in which she had stated she believed Jennifer was definitely drunk. Detective Mickey McEntee testified But Judge Bell had ruled that Robert's initial lies to the police, blaming the cat and claiming he wasn't in the park, were inadmissible. McEntee was frustrated, believing the lies are the meat and potatoes of this thing. An edited version of Robert's videotaped confession was played for the jury. Steve Levin, watching it for the first time, later told reporters it was a pack of lies. The jurors had mixed reactions. Some found it rang true, while one female juror believed Robert spoke with pained sincerity. That night, Robert went out partying. Detective Mike Sheehan testified, and during a tense cross-examination, Littman tried to discredit his observation that there was dirt on Jennifer's face by showing crime scene photos where none was visible. Sheehan insisted he saw dirt, which visibly frustrated Littman. Dr. Maria Alendi, the medical examiner, testified that pressure would have been applied to Jennifer's neck for at least 20 to 30 seconds, or possibly even longer, perhaps more than a minute. Littman, in cross-examination, got her to admit that she had told the grand jury it could have been as little as 15 seconds. Dr. Alan Garber, the jogger, testified for the prosecution, now stating that he saw a white man on top of a lifeless person, shaking them. This contradicted his initial report to police, where he described the activity as rocking or humping. Littman's cross-examination focused on this change, forcing Garber to admit he first described it as sexual, and only changed his story later, claiming he minimized what he saw out of fear because his wife was pregnant. The jurors had strongly divided opinions on his credibility. Dr. Werner Spitz, the prosecution's final key witness, testified that Jennifer was likely strangled with her own blouse, twisted into a noose, for at least 30 seconds and possibly several minutes. His stubborn and vituperative demeanor under cross-examination caused several jurors to dislike him and his testimony. Fairstein rested her case. Littman called a surprisingly small number of witnesses. One of his first was Steve Sirocco, the original ADA on the case. Littman used Sirocco's testimony to imply the police investigation was flawed, pointing out that Sirocco was never even told that Jennifer's panties had been found far from her body on the night of the arrest. Littman called a hand surgeon who testified that Robert's hand injury was consistent with his being pinned on the ground. Littman's main expert, Dr. Ronald Kornblum, testified that Jennifer's bruises could have been from falling. Her death could have been caused by an arm chokehold, lasting only 5 to 15 seconds, and the scratches she inflicted on Robert could have been from playful sexual activity. After Kornblum's testimony, Littman abruptly rested his case, taking Fairstein by surprise. Littman's summation lasted 4 hours. He argued that after 10 weeks, the prosecution still had no clear theory of the case. He attacked the flawed police evidence and directed the jury back to Robert's videotaped statement, asking if that was the kind of story you make up to get out of something. Fairstein's summation, also 4 hours long, began and ended with emotional appeals, urging the jury to remember Jennifer by looking at the photos of her alive and then dead. She attacked Robert's story as illogical, asking where was his other arm tied to the Woolworth building. She suggested a motive, rage from impotence caused by alcohol. On March 17, St. Patrick's Day, Judge Bell instructed the jury on the possible charges: 2 counts of murder, manslaughter in the first degree, manslaughter in the second degree, and criminally negligent homicide. The first vote was taken. 3 jurors voted to convict Robert of intentional murder, while the others were opposed. The jury spent the next several days in heated debate. They reread testimony and re-examined evidence, including Jennifer's clothes. They even reenacted the crime in the jury room, with one juror sitting on another's chest to test the defense's claim that Robert could have flipped Jennifer off him. The experiment was inconclusive. The jurors became deeply divided and argumentative, with shouting matches erupting. On the 9th day of deliberations, the vote for intentional murder had shifted to 7 in favor, but the jury remained deadlocked. Juror Guy Gravenson sent a private note to the judge, said he was physically ill from the stress, and tried to leave, screaming, "I'm getting out of here." Forewoman Deborah Kavanaugh sent a hysterical note to the judge, saying she planned to leave the country that evening. The jury was on the verge of collapse. On March 25, 1988, on the 9th day of deliberations, with the jury deadlocked and falling apart. Lippman and Fairstein negotiated a plea bargain in Judge Bell's chambers. The deal: Robert would plead guilty to manslaughter in the first degree. In exchange, he would receive a reduced sentence of 5 to 15 years, and the prosecution would drop the pending burglary charge and agree not to prosecute him for any other criminal acts, including the alleged theft from his neighbor, Mrs. Murphy. In a hushed courtroom that afternoon, Robert formally entered his plea. When asked by the judge if he intended to cause serious physical injury to Jennifer, he initially equivocated, saying that looking back on everything, he would have to say yes. But in his heart, he did not mean for anything to happen. Fairstein objected loudly, shouting that she wanted the judge to ask him about his mind and his hands, not his heart. Judge Bell rephrased the question, and Robert answered, "Yes, Your Honor," while continuing to shake his head from side to side. The trial ended. On April 15, 1988, Robert Chambers stood before Judge Bell and was formally sentenced to 5 to 15 years in prison. Quick break. Ads keep the show running, but if you want to skip them, the ad-free version's on Patreon for just $3 a month. Links in the show notes. And we're back. Thanks for sticking through that. Let's get back to it. In May 1988, just weeks after Robert Chambers had pleaded guilty to manslaughter and been sentenced to 5 to 15 years in prison, a disturbing videotape surfaced that would reignite public outrage over the case. The home video had been recorded at a slumber party in an Upper East Side apartment just weeks before Chambers' trial began in January, while he was out on bail. It showed Chambers, then 21 years old, frolicking with 4 scantily clad young women, including his girlfriend, 19-year-old Shawn Koval. On the tape, Chambers was seen alternately wearing jeans, a t-shirt, a sweater, and a wig. At various points, he appeared to be smoking marijuana and holding what looked like a vial of cocaine. But it was 2 particular moments on the tape that would prove most shocking. During a game of charades, Chambers acted out a strangulation, putting himself in a chokehold. Later, he picked up a small female doll. Looking directly into the camera with a smile, he said in a falsetto voice, "My name is," and twisted the doll's head. He then looked down and said in a serious voice, "Oops, I think I killed it." Part of the videotape was aired on Fox Television's A Current Affair on the evening of May 23, 1988, with a second portion broadcast the following night. The program had reportedly paid one of the young women on the tape, Melissa Bushell, $10,000 for it. The Levin family was devastated by the tape. The timing was particularly painful, as it emerged just days before what would have been Jennifer's birthday on May 21st. Jennifer's sister, Danielle Levin Roberts, 23, said that to have absolutely no regard for her life was disgusting. "He's not even a person," she said. "He's an animal." She added that all she had to say to Robert Chambers was, "Why don't you kick some more dirt over her grave?" Jennifer's father, Stephen Levin, refused to watch the broadcast. He said that although he was shocked and devastated by news of the tape, it confirmed what he already knew. He's a low-life, drug addict, murderer, and he should be in prison for the rest of his life. Jennifer's grandfather, Arnold Dominitz, said the videotape of Chambers twisting the doll's head was the most damaging indictment of how he killed Jennifer. He stated they were not surprised at the revelation of the psychopathic character of this murderer, but were shocked at how and what transpired. He expressed disappointment that someone didn't have the conscience to reveal this at trial time. In an interview with the television station, Shawn Koval said she thought her boyfriend was charming and would serve his prison time with him if she could. "It's his personality," she said. "He cares. My mother loves him." When reached at her Upper East Side home after the tape aired, Koval said she was upset about the release of the videotape, but would not elaborate. The state parole board indicated the videotape would not have much effect on Chambers' possibility of being released after 5 years. A spokesman explained that while it might be representative of his attitude as he was getting ready for trial, the board deals with his attitude when he took his plea and when he comes up for parole. The videotape became yet another chapter in a case that had already captivated and divided the city, providing what many saw as a window into Chambers' true character and his lack of remorse for taking Jennifer Levin's life. In 1997, while incarcerated at Green Haven Correctional Facility in Stormville, New York, Chambers sent an untitled essay he had written to prison anthologist Jeff Evans. The piece, subsequently titled Christmas Present, appeared in the book Undoing Time, American Prisoners in Their Own Words. The essay was an entry from one of his journals, which he described as a record of the meaningless hope and frightening losses of a person I don't even know. Chambers was released from Auburn Prison on February 14, 2003, after having served the entirety of his prison term due to his numerous infractions. His release was a media circus, with reporters staking out prime sections of the sidewalk opposite the prison as early as 13 hours before his 7:30 morning release time. The same day, Dateline NBC interviewed Chambers, who continued to claim that he strangled Levin accidentally in an attempt to stop her from hurting him during rough sex. He also falsely denied that he had been disciplined in prison. Jack Dorrian settled with Levin's parents on their claim that Dorrian's bar, where Levin and Chambers had been before they went to Central Park on the night of her death, had served too much alcohol to Chambers. A wrongful death lawsuit, which Chambers did not contest, provided that he must pay all lump sums he receives, including any income from book or movie deals, plus 10% of his future income up to $25 million to the Levin family. The family said all the money it receives from Chambers would go to victims' rights organizations. In July 2005, Chambers pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor drug charge, and on August 29th was given a reduced sentence of 90 days in jail and fined $200 for a license violation. The judge added 10 days to the time prosecutors and Chambers' lawyer had agreed on because he was an hour late for the hearing. He would have faced up to a year in jail if he had been convicted after trial. On October 22, 2007, Chambers was arrested again, this time in his own apartment, and charged with 3 counts of selling a controlled substance in the first degree, 3 counts of selling a controlled substance in the second degree, and 1 count of resisting arrest. His longtime girlfriend, Shawn Covell, was also arrested on 1 count of selling a controlled substance in the second degree. According to reports, Chambers struggled with officers who tried to handcuff him on the felony charges. One detective suffered a broken thumb in the fracas. Commenting on his new arrest, former Assistant District Attorney Linda Fairstein, who had prosecuted Chambers for Levin's death, said it didn't surprise her. She had always believed his problem with drugs and alcohol would get him in trouble again. He had the opportunity in prison to detox and take college courses to straighten out his life, but that clearly was of no interest to him. He had learned nothing in the last 20 years. Chambers and Covell were charged with running a cocaine operation out of the apartment. The two had previously been given notices for not paying rent, and the phone had been disconnected. On August 11, 2008, the Manhattan DA's office announced that Chambers had pleaded guilty to selling drugs. On September 2, 2008, he was sentenced to 19 years on the drug charge. Chambers was released from New York's Shawangunk Correctional Facility on July 25, 2023, after serving 15 years of his 19-year sentence. He will be on parole until 2028. Quick break. Ads keep the show running, but if you want to skip them, the ad-free version's on Patreon for just $3 a month. Links in the show notes. And we're back. Thanks for sticking through that. Let's get back to it. Jennifer Levin was 18 years old when she died in Central Park on August 26, 1986. She had just graduated from high school, having been voted best looking by her class. She was working as a hostess and saving money for college in Boston, where she planned to start in the fall. She was excited about her future and had told her friends about the wonderful summer she was having. Those who knew her remembered her as a live wire with personality, someone who was extroverted and determined from a young age. She loved attention, tried to make people laugh with her playful antics, and was known for her trendy, eye-catching style. Despite her insecurities, she had begun to blossom into a confident young woman. Her life was cut short by someone she trusted, in a place where she should have been safe. The case became a landmark moment in the victims' rights movement, sparking conversations about victim blaming and the treatment of women in the criminal justice system. Jennifer's family ensured that any money received from Chambers would go to victims' rights organizations, turning their tragedy into support for others who had suffered similar losses. Jennifer Levin's name remains synonymous with the fight for justice and the refusal to let victims be forgotten or blamed for the violence committed against them.